Hello, and thank you for tuning in to this episode of Ages of SEGA. Today we're going to look at the 13th game released by SEGA for their home consoles, Monaco GP. And don't let that blank title screen fool you, this game's pretty good. And there's some little bit of charm to those type of title screens. It reminds me of those old, early Black Box NES games. Now, this is one of the few games that really lived beyond the SG-1000 Sega Gremlin era. It went on to make such popular games as the Super Monaco GP on the Sega Genesis, and even came across to have a re-release on the PlayStation 2. Monaco GP is a game originally developed by Sega Gremlin in that late 70s, early 80s era. This is a 1980 release. Most of the early SG-1000 games tend to be conversions of the Sega Gremlin games, and they definitely seem to have that certain feel that the SG-1000 really handles well. It definitely lended itself to that VIC dual arcade architecture. Having spent time on this series, I consider the SG-1000 as a console for Sega Gremlin games, and Monaco GP is the game by Sega Gremlin. Now, the Monaco GP arcade game is notable for being the last video game by Sega to be a discrete logic arcade game. What that basically means is that the arcade game does not use a CPU, rather it uses a series of logic circuits to actually make the game. So think the early examples of that would be Pong. Whenever you see the game in the arcade, it's actually kind of a mix between a video game and an electromechanical game. A lot of the architecture on this console is electromechanical. Whenever you increase the speed, the tachometer is an actual tachometer that increases. Whenever you have the score, it lights up the LEDs versus going through and creating the score on the television screen itself. Given this type of architecture for the arcade game, you do reach a very definite point where you hit a kill screen, basically. Your score cannot go above 9,999, and that's really just due to the limitation of the LED lights. At that point, the levels stop changing. As you're going through the race on the arcade game, you have 90 seconds where you can crash as much as you want, but you have to hit 2,000 points before you hit that 90 seconds. At that point, you start going on a life system. During that time, 5 different locales kind of change, so there's a tunnel, the normal road, the bridge. But once you reach that 9,999 points, your score no longer increases and you just stay on the normal road. This is essentially called the kill screen. Given this, any home console port of the game cannot be arcade perfect. You miss all of those electromechanical features of the game. Now, I don't know if there's a kill screen on it, because as far as I've ever gotten is my high score being around 2,000 points. But I do know that they added in a few different levels. Your score has to be featured onto the television screen itself, so I don't really see a need for a kill screen on that. There's a few other changes to the home console port as well. For instance, your car jumps. In the arcade game, it didn't do that, so they actually made the home console port a little bit more arcadey. Now, the jumping cars is something that I would actually think would be a good feature in the actual Monaco GP. Unfortunately, we always took our video games and made them more racing simulation-like, where I think it should have gone the opposite way, and we should have taken actual racing and made them more video game-like. Think jumping cars, Peter Gunn theme song, and of course power-ups. You've got to have those. Now, one annoying difference from the game on its conversion to the home console is the way that the speed was handled. In the arcade game, you had 2 gear positions. You had low gear and high gear. Think of about how Outrun's done. But then you also had the gas pedal, just like Outrun, and that would control your speed a little bit more. Now, on the home console port, you didn't have that type of button layout. You also didn't have a gas pedal. So what they did was, instead of having a button for gas, button for brake, there is no brake. You just press up on the control pad to speed up, and down to slow down. And you basically have 10 preset speeds. This gets pretty annoying, but you do kind of get used to it. You just set your speed and then you work on dodging cars. That works pretty well. And what the 1 and 2 buttons do are just makes a car jump. And this is a really good game to get just basically any way that you can. Unfortunately, it's not a game that's readily available. It was really only released in its original form very different ways. You had the original arcade, You had the SG-1000 port. You also had the SEGA Saturn port whenever it was on the SEGA Memorial Selection Volume 2 on the SEGA Saturn. None of these except the arcade port and the SG-1000 port were available outside of Japan. Now, there was a re-release on the PlayStation 2 for this, but it was a completely redone game. It actually doesn't look too bad, but it's not really worth the price to upgrade, and I've never actually played this version, so I can't really speak too much on it. This is just a very classic, high-score-based game. It's one of those games, much like the other SG-1000 games that we've seen, where you place the console on the floor, you sit down next to it, you pop in Monaco GP for 5 minutes, turn it off, pop in Starjacker for 5 minutes, turn it off, and you just try to beat your high score from the last time that you played. And for that, this game is amazing. It definitely features that second generation style of gameplay, the very high score generation of video games. Be sure to like, comment, or subscribe. And also check out our new episode coming in 2 weeks. It's going to be Sega Flipper. And check out SEGANerds.com.